What'd you miss? An Asian American group that's suing Harvard University says it has evidence of discrimination in the school's admission process. Harvard's response is the case is based on, quote, incomplete and preliminary data. In today's Business of Equality, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about the bottom line impact of diversity, we explore the dynamics driving this case. I'm joined now by Bloomberg's Patricia Hurtado, who co-wrote Bloomberg's story. So, Patty, Harvard is defending a lawsuit that's brought on by a group representing Asian American students, the Students for Fair Admissions. Give us a sense of the timeline and where we are, because this lawsuit was brought on in 2014.
Yeah, and so even though it was filed in November 2014, we're kind of at a crossroads today. Both Harvard and the plaintiffs that are this group of student applicants basically are asking the judge for a win before trial.
And we're talking about these documents. We actually haven't seen them. We're talking about these documents that reportedly show that Harvard is discriminating against Asian American students. Harvard's response thus far has been,
well, Harvard says that these documents are incomplete and that both sides have their own experts. And Harvard says that the plaintiff's expert is basically doing engineering and gerrymandering of data and statistics. Harvard says that they look at the whole student applicant. They don't look at just grades and SAT scores. They look at the whole thing. What kind of activities does a kid do after school? Do they do any public works? And so basically what we have now is a war of conflicting accounts of how do you get into Harvard, and does Harvard really, racially profile and have racial bias against
stuff that
Asians?
Fills books and books and books on bookshelves. Here's the thing, though. The data that we're talking about is data from Harvard's own internal review. Isn't that right?
Yes, actually, both sides are reviewing thousands and thousands of pages of documents and applications that have been anonymous applicants, as well as internal documents which Harvard uses. And Harvard gave the plaintiffs both that evidence, and both sides say their statistics show that Harvard doesn't discriminate according to Harvard, or according to the plaintiffs that they do actually discriminate against Asians because they don't look at their qualifications and their grade scores.
Right, because if you were just looking at academic performance, the Asian Americans actually perform better than any other group, but because you're also looking at subjective traits like ability, courage, kindness, among the other things cited in the documents, that's where they're graded lower. Now, SFFA, which is the group that's representing the plaintiffs, says the documents confirms Asian American suspicions they were discriminated against, and actually makes comparisons to the discrimination and stereotyping against Jewish applicants back in the 20s and the 30s. Put this into context for us.
Yeah, Harvard says that basically the plaintiffs say this is just another example. At Harvard in the 1920s and 30s discriminated against Jewish applicants because they didn't want that many Jewish students to go to school there, and that this is the same kind of thing, that they're very qualified white kids who should deserve to go to Harvard. Harvard says that that was an unfortunate incident in their history in the past, but they have now, since the 1970s, have had this holistic, whole person applicant. So they not just look at the kid's perfect GPA, and they said they get 40,000 applicants for 1,600 seats. So they could get everybody with perfect scores and perfect grades.
Right.
But what they say is they want to look at the whole thing, the whole student applicant.
All the intangibles, certainly. Clarify it for me, because when I was applying to college decades ago, if I ticked the box Asian American on the application, that was to my benefit. I benefited from affirmative action. So are the plaintiffs effectively arguing against affirmative action now?
Well, Harvard says that this is, and actually today the NAACP also issued a statement that this is going to be unfortunate because it will harm all minorities for race-based some kind of criterion being used for college applicants, and that this lawsuit could end up all the way, if it prevails, could end up all the way to the Supreme Court and could challenge, affirmative action policies that colleges have been using.
Very quickly here, Edward Blum is the founder of SFFA. Who is he, and what's his story here?
He is a gentleman from Maine, and he has, Harvard has said he has a history of filing lawsuits that have challenged other race bias, and he says race influenced decisions.